Hello and glory to Motherland. Alright guys, what's up? It's been a while since I've done another video of Substance. There's good reasons for that. We've got a lot of changes in the old life ski. We've gotten new jobs, we've got new hardware that I'm very excited to talk about later. But today we're going to go back to an old topic, which is cooling. Now, last time we talked about different thermal compounds and how they work and which one might be better for you, and I touched a little bit on the risks of using liquid metal. It was a pretty piss-poor explanation, but anyway, today we're here to talk about actual coolers, sort of the evolution of coolers, and which one is best for a modern system, or I guess you can use all of the points made today to extrapolate. Today we're going to need a few examples that you've already seen, like my humongous air heatsink from Be Quiet. That's, I believe, a Slim Rock something. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And one of these. So the very first thing I would like to do on this topic is make a very clear distinguishing line between something like this and something like this. Alright, so enough about that. Let's get back to the topic. So, very first thing I would actually like to cover, despite me talking about liquid cooling first, is air coolers. So the very first thing I'd like to do is show you guys an old air cooler and kind of compare it to a new air cooler and talk about how it works. Because air coolers, believe it or not, use liquid. But regardless of that, they have some advantages, so I would like to discuss that. So back in the olden days, these coolers usually were made out of nothing but aluminum or copper, and they relied solely on surface area to do their job, meaning that they weren't assisted by anything other than the material, and having a lot of surface area to dissipate heat on. Generally works okay, really no points of failure aside from a fan, not a bad design. But then, they discovered that water is actually really good at storing and conducting heat compared to air. So that's sort of where we get into modern coolers, because modern coolers, pretty much all of them, come with a certain amount of these little copper pipes, which you see here. These are called heat pipes. The reason why they're called heat pipes is because they transfer heat really well. And the reason why they transfer heat really well is because they use a small amount of low boiling point liquid sealed within this tube. And also within this tube is some sort of wall lining. Sometimes it can be what's called sintered, where it's kind of like a granular siding. Sometimes they use metal wicks. There's a bunch of different methods to making a heat pipe and to get a camera to focus on your face. Essentially what you need to understand is that there's a small amount of liquid in here with a very low boiling point. So while it's at a very low temperature, it remains liquid. As it comes down to the cooling plate, it will hit your very hot CPU and get transformed into a gas. And then it will rise through the aluminum heat fins, basically have that heat energy removed from it from the fan and the air blowing over the heat fins, and then it will condense back down to a liquid to repeat the process on the heat plate. So that's essentially how air coolers work. Now you know. At least modern ones. So that's not very different from how one of these would function. Closed-loop liquid cooler. You put this on your CPU, the water runs across it, it absorbs the heat, it goes into this aluminum radiator, where the heat is then released through air movement, and bada bing, bada boom, you got a cool-ass CPU. Well, for that, we're going to need to move over to the IBM whiteboard of science. That one. All right, I'm gonna move over there, and then we'll do the thing. All right, here I go. Thank you for looking at my IBM whiteboard of science. I would be standing next to it, but then I would have to get up, and I just can't fucking deal with that. Just kidding, I just have no way of actually getting my microphone over there. So, on the IBM whiteboard of science, you can see that the fan and heatsink combination have two working parts, the heatsink and the fan, whereas the all-in-one liquid cooler demonstration at the top has a bunch of different parts, such as the pump, the radiator, the fans, and the tubing. If you want to count the liquid inside as another component, there you go, there's one more. But basically all I'm trying to show you is that you have a lot more things that can go wrong with a closed-loop liquid cooler. For example, your tubing could become brittle or become old and start to permeate out the liquid, which will then affect the performance of the pump, probably leading to its death. And then, your pump is dead. Also, your pump can die. Also, your fans are still in play because there's fans on the radiator as well as on heat sinks, and those will die in their own time as well. But at least with the heat sink and fan combination, the heat sink is doing 90% of, well, maybe not 90.
So yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to spend more money on a closed-loop liquid cooler that has more points of failure and cools at the same capacity as a humongous heatsink? Or would you rather go with a humongous heatsink that you can, never really have to worry about again? It's choice, ladies and gentlemen. You can choose. You can choose to go with the safer one or the not safe one. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make.
Because the pumps will wear out in any liquid cooling system. It's another spinning part. It will eventually die. It has a lifespan like anything else. So that pretty much sums up my opinion on liquid coolers. I think that there are use cases for them, of course. Compact builds greatly benefit from the extra space you get to work around the socket area of a motherboard. That's the one biggest advantage aside from aesthetics. A lot of people think that the closed loop liquid coolers look very snazzy, and I admit that they do. Also, it's a lot easier to find RGB compatible liquid coolers than it is to find RGB compatible air coolers, if that's your thing. So I can completely understand why a closed loop liquid cooler might be an attractive option, but I would also like to point out that if you use your computer for work, I would really highly recommend that you go with something that's more reliable, and the most reliable thing you can do is get an air cooler. But of course the disadvantages are that if you have an air cooler in the way of your socket, sometimes your memory access to your RAM sticks can be very hard without removing the cooler. Sometimes installation of these bigger, bulkier air coolers can be a real nightmare when your system is already built and you're just trying to plop it on to replace a lesser cooler. There's many other reasons to go with a closed-loop liquid cooler. Holy shit. Oh, it was just my Omega zip drive. Thank God. That thing is a piece of garbage. Anyway, getting back on topic. The point I'm trying to make is that if you're coming at it thinking that having a liquid cooler is going to make your computer perform better because it's a liquid cooler, that's wrong. It will only work better if you have more fin density or more surface area, if you will, to dissipate heat on. And air coolers can achieve easily the same capacities as this 280 millimeter radiator can, such as, there's plenty of options. A lot of names that come to mind are Be Quiet or Noctua. Sorry, I don't know why their name slipped my mind, but you get the point. I'd highly recommend air coolers if you're a first-time system builder, as well as, especially when it comes to custom loops, there's a lot more added complexity. Although that being said, closed loops do remove a lot of that complexity. Again, not out of, convenience, but actually to your detriment, in my opinion. But that's the story, ladies and gentlemen. So now you know a little bit more about PC cooling solutions. Hopefully you go with this one, because it's sick. Look at it. I mean, there's so many tubes and lights, and Jesus, wow, the temperatures are... Ugh.